Okay, so we are on 13A today. Just finishing off the last bit about splitting properties. Um, so the very top of 13A. Hadgisa Nagra, Hadgisa Nahara. What if you have to split a property in which one side is a river and perpendicular to that, one side is a irrigation canal? So obviously being near the source of water is beneficial. But here's the thing. If and Rashi has a diagram here that's very helpful. If you split the property from north to south, not perpendicular, parallel to the river, then they both share the irrigation canal, but one guy gets the entire riverfront and the other guy gets none of the riverfront. If you split it vertically, east to west, then you have a reverse situation. Everybody has access to the river, but one guy has all the access to the irrigation canal, and both of those are beneficial. So how do you do it? Lo bekarnazol. You do it, karnazol, we translate that, from the corners. So like a pizza pie, basically. In the diagram, Raish and Sheen stand for Reuven and Shimon, I guess. And so you split it so that everybody gets equal parts access to the river, equal access to the irrigation canal, and equal parts with access to neither. Okay. Now, continuing in the Mishnah, Velosa Trakli. So again, the Mishnah had described situations in which a parcel of land is too small, for example, to be split in such a way because each piece would be too small to be useful. So the whole parcel itself is fine, but if you split it in half, then each piece becomes too small to have real value. So what about this case? So what do you do when you have a property like that, when it's too small for each one to have a significant share? Um, can you like, and so the real question is, can one party force the other to not split it in some way? So compensation or whatever, but can you the one party force the other to keep the parcel whole and to somehow get that allotted to him? Rabbi Yehuda Amar Isdina de Agud, that you have an idea, you have a rule that you can propose. Look, either you propose a financial compensation for me to buy you out, or if you don't want to do it, then I'll do it. Then I'll set the price for me to buy you out. Um, so, and Rav Nachman Amar Leistin de Rav Nachman disagrees. He says no, nobody has the power to force a buyout. Amalei Rav, and this, by the way, this is reminiscent a little bit to me of, what is the fairest way to split a piece of cake, to split a cake, right, or a piece of cake or whatever. Um, I make the cut and you choose the piece. So this is, in a way, it's a little bit similar. It's like, I'll let you set the price. If you don't want to participate, then I'll set the price. I'm gonna Rav Nachman, so Rav says to Rav Nachman, who says that no party can force a buyout. According to you, that you can't do it. What if you have an estate with two sons, two heirs? One is a Bachar, so he gets double portion, and the other is a regular son, non-Bachar, he gets a single portion. So if you have, three, if you divide the whole thing into three, one guy gets 2/3, the Bachar gets 2/3, and the other guy gets a third. Now, what if the estate consists of living things like an Eben, right? So obviously you can't cut it up. It would be, you need a Solomonic solution, you might say. Or if you have an animal that is not kosher, right? A live animal. So if we're a kosher animal, you could say, okay, let's slaughter the animal. You take 2/3 and I'll take 1/3. But if it's not a kosher, what are you going to do with the carcass, right? It makes it value. It reduces the value tremendously to kill it. And you can't split a live animal. Can't see how do you do it? Amalei, so the answers, Shani Omer, Oved Laza Yom Echad, Shnei Yomim. No, you don't have to split the actual person in the case of a slave or an animal. What you do is you take his labor, right? And, every 3 days, he'll work 1 day for the regular heir and 2 days for the Bechor. So that's how he gets 2/3. That's how you split it 2/3 and 1/3. Mace were asked, Misha how about a case of someone who is half a slave and half free? How does this happen if an Eved Kanani is owned by two partners and one of them frees the Eved Kanani and the other one does not? So then he's the partner, the half that belongs to the one partner is free, and the half that belongs to the other is not free. So how do you do this? So every 2 days, he works 1 day for the guy who still owned half of him, and the other day he works for himself. This is what Beis Hillel says. The content is Rabo. Okay, so you've solved the labor problem, right? Like there's a value problem. How do you split the guy's labor? That's Atzma Loti content. However, the person's personal status you haven't resolved, because what's the problem here? Another Kanani can marry a shifcha, right? Can marry a woman who is the same status as him, but he cannot marry a Jew. Lisa Shifra. Now, how about this guy who's half and half? Lisa Shifra and Yochel, he can't marry a Shifra Kanani, a female Eved Kanani, because half of him is fully Jewish because he's been freed, right? The half of him has been freed, is fully Jewish, so he's not allowed to marry an Eved Kanani. And Lisa Basarian and Yochel, he can't marry a Jew because half of him is still an Eved Kanani. So you batel. So should he just sit idle? In other words, should he not get married? The whole purpose of creation is for people to procreate. Lo, because the verse says, I think it's in Tehillim, no, Yeshayahu. Lo tohu bara l'shavas yisara. That God did not create the world for chaos, or for not chaos, for to be empty. L'shavas yisara. He created it to be settled, right? So from this, this is a key verse in the period of review of procreation. Ella, so what do you do? So it's not suitable to have this guy not be able to marry anybody, which the chief rabbin of Israel should maybe take into account, or the government of Israel, legislature of Israel should take into account, because they only permit religious marriage. That would seem to be seems to me to be a not using their authority properly to take into account this important principle that people should be able should be free to procreate. Ella, my political comment there. Ella, Kofen is Rabbo, Bosinosa Ben Koren. So what do? You force the guy who still owns the half of him, you force him to free the other half of him. So now he's a free person. And now, you're forcing the guy to give up what's essentially property, right? His ownership interest in this Eved. So he has to be paid for it. So the former Eved owes him the money for half of his value. And Beis Hillel actually decided, you know what, this makes sense. So they agreed with Beis Hillel. Okay, but the point is that this shows that you cannot force the other partner to buy out your portion. 1 second. Yeah, so the only reason we're doing this, the only reason we're allowing this is because of the personal status problem. But from a strictly monetary point of view, if that were not a problem, Beis Hillel would have said, work one day for yourself and one day for the half owner. And they do not say that one can force the other to buy out the share. The only reason we're forcing them to buy out the share is because of personal status issues. But with land, where that's not an issue, it seems like we would we would not force this buyout. The answer is no. There's a difference between these two cases. Shani hachada good ika good leika, because the like one of them is in a position to say, I'll buy myself out. The slave can say, I'll buy myself out. But the owner, one second. But the slave can't say, but you, the owner, or you set the price. We can't say, or you set the price, because once the animal has been freed, he can't be unfreed, right? He can't be purchased or put into slavery by the same master, right? So there is no way to say, I'll buy you out or you buy me out. No, there's only one side here. That's why we don't say it here. But in the case of land, where either party could theoretically buy out the other party, we do say that. So Moshe says Tashma. What if you have two brothers who inherit land? One is rich and one is poor. And there's two properties that they're left. One is a bathhouse and the other is a olive press. Hasan l'sachar, hasachar la'amsa. So if they are being rented out to somebody, so to a third party, then they just split the rental proceeds, right? Hasan l'amsa. If they were being used by the family themselves, Asher, Omer, La'ani, the rich brother can buy out the poor one. He can say, okay, well, I'll you can have the bathhouse. You run the bathhouse, but the poor guy doesn't have the capital to run the bathhouse. He needs to have labor in there. He needs to keep it maintained. Or the rich brother can say, you know what, you take the olive press, but also the olive press requires capital to operate. So it seems like the poor brother cannot force a buyout, right? He can't say to the rich brother, okay, buy me out. Because we're saying that the rich brother can say no, like you take either one or the other, but he's not consenting to a buyout. So this seems to indicate that we don't force a buyout. More answers.
The poor person. Wait, I thought the poor person can force him, but the rich person cannot, right? Or he can force the rich person, but he can't set the price, right?
Yeah, well,
because he doesn't have the money.
Exactly. Right, so that's what the Gemara is going to answer. Is Hasuname Gudika, a good leka. Yeah, we're talking about a situation where the poor person can't say either you buy me out or I buy you out, because he doesn't have the means to do the buyout. So that's why like maybe he could say that, right? Maybe the law is that he could say that, but the fact is he doesn't have the means to do it, and that is why the rich brother is able to dictate the terms or to refuse the buyout. Okay, because one brother can't, you could say go to Argon, but it's not practically possible. Okay, Tashma. So we have another attempt to question Rav Nachman. If you have something that's big enough and it can be split and it's still the same thing, right? Like if you have a field that's big enough to split into two fields, but each one is still a field that can be used as a field for whatever it was being used, then that can be divided imlav. But if it's not big enough, so if it wouldn't be the same thing if you split it up because it's too small, then you evaluate it and one buys out the other. So this directly challenges Rav Nachman, right? Rav Nachman said one partner can't buy out the other, and here we're saying you can. The Gemara says, indeed, tonight, you know what? It's machlokas tonight. So So that's why we find positions that both support and reject Rav Nachman, because the earlier machlokas of Tanya, where we have that in this brisa. If one partner says, um, like, it's okay, you take a larger share of the property that we're splitting, and I'll take less. You allow that. And Shimon Gamliel and Shimon Gamliel says no. So hey, what are we talking about? Like, if you're going to take it like literally, my Talmud Shimon Gamliel, like, why would you say if I'm conceding? I want to take, I agree to take a smaller piece. That's within my rights. Why would Rosh Gamliel say it's not valid? Actually, it's a deficient brisa. We have to fill in the blanks. So read between the lines. This is how it should read. If one says you take a larger portion, I'll take a smaller portion, then that's valid. And this is the missing part. If he says I'll force a buyout, we also we allow that. And Rav Shimon is commenting on Ein Showing Well. No, he agrees that if one says I'll take less, that's fine. But what he's disagreeing with is whether you can force a buyout. So the Tanakama says you can force a buyout, and Gamliel says you can't force a buyout, and that's Rav Nachman's position as well. Mara says, no, I don't like the way you're reading that, Bryson. The Olam Kedekatana. You can read it as written. With a comma, my Talmud Rav Shimon Gamliel. So then what's Rav Shimon Gamliel's problem? Why doesn't he allow it? Because one guy can say, like, you want me to pay for the larger for the larger share, then I don't have the cash to pay you. And I don't want you to I don't want it as a gift, right? I don't like taking gifts, right? It's written, someone who hates gifts will endure. Um, so that's why Rashid Gamliel says you can't, like, what's the situation here? If it's a gift, maybe he doesn't want the gift. You don't force somebody to take a gift. And if and it must be not a case where you can provide compensation. Um, so basically, Rashid Gamliel's position is justified by saying this must be a case where it's a gift, and you don't force a gift because some people don't like to take gifts. Okay. I'm going to Rabbi Yosef. Not Rabbi Yehuda Yishmaeli. When Rabbi Yehuda, who said you can say go to Ogon, that you can force a buyout, that is, he received that from Shmuel. It's not. Here's the Mishnah. Kisvei Kodesh is a long Mishnah that at the end we'll get to the point about what this has to do with forcing a sale. Kisvei Kodesh, if you have the Holy Scripture, even if they're both agreeable to split the scroll, you shouldn't split it. Shmuel says, that's only if it's in one long scroll, right? One volume. If you have two scrolls, two copies of the scroll, then you definitely can split that, because why not? Now it sounds like he's saying you can force a division, right? You can force a buyout. Now, if you want to say that you can't force a buyout, right? Then even if it's two volumes, if you can't force a buyout, you can't force a buyout. So the fact that we're allowing a buyout here indicates that you can't force a buyout. So Tirguma Rav Shalman B'Shishnein Rotzin. Rav Shalman says, no, we're not talking about it here about a forced division. So they both agree that they want to split these two scrolls, right? That one takes one and one takes the other. It's not talking about a case of forcing a buyout. It's an agreeable buyout. And the reason that we're talking about it is to distinguish between one scroll and two scrolls, that you can't cut a scroll in the middle to split it. Amar Meimar, Hilchasa Isdina Begodo Meimar says the halacha is you can force a buyout. Okay, so that's what you say, but what about Rav Nachman? Like, why do you discard his opinion? I never heard of this Rav Nachman. Kolomar lo Srili means, by which you meant to say, like, I don't buy it. Rav Nachman doesn't make sense to me, so I'm ruling the other way. It's alone. Um, so now the Gemara is questioning this, that do we really reject Rav Nachman? Do we really say you can force a buyout? I'm sorry, when I said before about the Kisvei Kodesh being a long brisa, that's right. That's one coming up. That was a short one. Below, isn't that so? Do we not follow Rav Nachman? Do we indeed say the halacha is you can force the buyout? The two sons of China, they had an inheritance of two servants, two female servants. One of them was a good cook, and the other one was a good seamstress. We also look coming to Rava, so like they had each one wanted to cook. Let's say they couldn't agree who gets the cook and who gets the seamstress. Came to Rava. V'yamalu leis dino de good Rava. You can't force a buyout. Um, so um, so he appears to be according with Rav Nachman's view that you cannot force a buyout. The Gemara says, that case is not indicative of the general law. The Lamar violates Harvaya, the Lamar violates Harvaya. In that case, each one wants both, right? So, maybe what's best is to agree on division of labor, that each of the servants will work, alternate days for each of the two brothers. And so one trying to force a buyout on the other, love good or good. It's not a case of buying one out. It's like in this case, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that you can't force the other one because it's a two-sided thing, right? Because it's not only the compensation for the buyout for the one, it's the having to. It's a good thing to get the other one as well. In other words, it's not a typical case. And it's true that one can't say I'll take one of each, because is it true that this is the case? Like Gemara is questioning the assumption that they each wanted the cook and they each wanted a seamstress. What about the case of again, back to the scriptures, right? The scrolls of scripture. Now, the assumption is that, look, let's say we have Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, right? Well, I want Yeshayahu, I also want Yirmiyahu, and so do you, right? So isn't it the same case? But in that case, Shmuel said, it's only if they're in one volume, but if there's two volumes, then you do force a split, you do force a buyout, right? So why is it different in the case of the cook and the seamstress? So again, Rosh Hashanah says it's when they both agree. So it's not a case of forced division, it's a case of agreeable division. Okay. Hmm. Now here comes the long mission.
So what was the case with the procreation? So in the end, did they agree that is with the Evan procreation? Do they agree that?
Yes, they agreed about that. But the reason that everyone agrees on that one is in order to allow the guy to marry. Because if you would not, force a buyout, then he would be stuck, right? He'd be half Evan, half Ben Chorin, and he wouldn't be able to marry anybody. In that case, that's why everyone agrees that we allow for a buyout. But that still leaves open the question of property, right? Property doesn't have that problem, so that you have to still have the machlokas about whether we allow forced buyout or not.
But one opinion would hold that they could force the buyout with property, right?
Yes, correct. Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah. Okay. So let's have a look at this brisa. When you're writing scrolls, then you can put on the same scroll or join together scrolls of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim into one long scroll. Dibur Meir. That's what Meir says. You know, Meir, Torah b'fnei atzma, Nevi'im b'fnei atzma, Ksubim b'fnei atzma. No, you can't mix from Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksubim, right? You can put Bereshis together with Shmos, but you can't put Torah together, Devarim together with Yehoshua. And the Chachamim say each sefer has to be written by itself. Presumably meaning not referring to the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, which obviously, we put together in one scroll. But when you have, Shmuel and Shoftim, let's say, you have to, the Chachamim say you have to put those separate. Hold on one second, please. Sorry. Rabbi Yehuda says on this, Masa Baitus ben Zunin, there was this guy Baitus, he had 8 books of the Nevi'im in one scroll. Al Pi Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and he did this on the authority of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. V'yeshomrim, so that supports the Rabbi Yehuda's position, right? Not Chachamim, because according to Chachamim that would not be allowed. But Yeshomrim, but some say no. The case was not that he had 8 together in one scroll. He had 8 separate books. So just saying that he had 8 books in the Nevi'im, but they were all separate. Amar Rabbi. We once had a case of the whole Tanakh written in one scroll. We said it was fine. Now the Brisa continues. Ben chumash l'chumash shel Torah arba shitim. When you have when you're writing a Torah and you have the break between like Bereshis and Shmos, or Shmos and Vayikra, etc., you have to have 4 blank lines in between each book. Similarly, between one book of Nevi'im and another book, you have to leave 4 blank lines. Ubanavi, Ubanavi, Shel Shnei Masar, but in the Shnei Masar, right, where you have the 12 minor prophets, then Gimel Shiti. You don't need 4 lines, you can have 3 lines in between. However, if you're finishing one book at the bottom of a column, and then you can start in the new column. You don't need a space, at the top of the new column. Starting at the top of a new column is good enough.
Is that true for everything, or just for the Nevi'im? Was that true also for the Chumshei Torah?
Interesting question. Doesn't specify. But since the Gemara will soon give a reason for this, it seems like the reason would apply to Torah as well. So if you finish Bereshis at the bottom of a column, you can start Shmos at the top of the next column, and it seems likely to me. I don't know the actual halacha. If you want to join together Torah Nevi'im including in one scroll, you can do it. And another rule is that at the beginning of the scroll, you have to have a blank column, or not, doesn't say a column, but you have enough blank space at the beginning of the scroll in order to roll it around the Eitzai. And at the end, you have to have enough free space, enough empty scroll to roll around the entire circumference of the scroll. Okay, so the one's going to comment right away. That's not equivalent, right? Because at the beginning of the scroll, you just have to go around the thin pole. But then you get to the end of the Torah, like think of the Torah when you're reading at the end of the Devarim, you have a lot, you have a pretty wide circumference of the part that you've rolled up already, right? So to go around that circumference is more than you needed at the beginning. In other words, it seems like you need more space at the end than the beginning. We'll comment on that a little further coming up. Umasai Milmata, and as we just said, if you finish one book at the bottom of the column, you can start at the top of the next column without leaving further space. If you want to later on, like, cut the scroll to separate two books, you can do it. You can do it. My comma says, what are you telling us? It seems pretty obvious. Like, why would you think that you can't separate two books? What is what it means? Um, um, it's giving a reason that you can start at the top, because if you have, in the context where you're continuing the end of one book at the bottom and starting on the next column, starting the next book, it would make sense to have, it would not be understandable to have the 4 blank lines, right? Because you'd understand that you're leaving the 4 blank lines as a separation, right? But what happens if you then cut that into 2? Then all of a sudden you have a standalone book, the second part, which doesn't start at the top of the column, starts 4 lines down. It doesn't make sense in that context. But because you have the potential to do that, that's why you should start the new column, the new book, at the top of the column in such a situation.
If it starts in the middle, you shouldn't be able to cut it, right? Because now you got 8 lines of Barashi associated with the cut piece, with the second piece. That doesn't make sense, right?
That does seem right. I wonder if you could cut it in such a way that, that it's not a full column. That doesn't seem like that would be supported, but it's not clear. Okay, so let's stop here for today and pick it up tomorrow.
Well, I have some of this seems to carry over today. I've davened in shuls where they lane the Haftorah from a cloth, and each Navi is a separate scroll. So Yeshua, if they're laning Haftorah from Yeshua, it's a Yeshua scroll, or a Yeshayahu. They're not bound together, all the Nevi'im.
Right, and that was the view of Chachamim in the Brisa. We have a three-way machlokas in that Brisa we just read. One is that you can put the whole thing together, and one is that you can only put Nevi'im with Nevi'im. And Chachamim said, no, each sefer has to be a scroll by itself. And that seems to be the practice that you mentioned.
Joshua Clark, thank you.
Okay, see you tomorrow.